The desert at dusk is a strange place. The colors bleed into each other, purples and oranges smearing across the sky like a bruised sunset. My buddy, Liam, and I were out there to capture exactly that. We're amateur drone photographers, always chasing that perfect, otherworldly shot. That evening, we were deep in the Arizona wilderness, miles from any town, just the two of us, my drone, and the vast, silent landscape. We'd been flying for about an hour, getting some incredible footage of the sun dipping below the jagged mesas. The drone, a Mavic 3, was buzzing high above us, a tiny speck against the darkening sky. I was piloting the eyes glued to the controller's screen, while Liam acted as a spotter. "Bring it a little to the left," he'd say. "Catch that light hitting the canyon wall." It was perfect. We were in our element, completely absorbed. That's when I noticed the battery warning. "Heads up, Liam. Down to 15%. I'm gonna start bringing it home pre-meta-toggled to return to home feature." And the drone started its slow, automated descent back to our launch point. We watched a familiar routine, but as it got closer, something felt off. On my screen, I could see the live feed. The drone was flying over a patch of dense, thorny scrub brush, and then I saw it. A figure. It was moving through the brush with an unnatural speed, keeping pace with the drone. "Whoa, check this out," I said, pointing at the screen. "Is that a person? What are they doing out here?" Liam squinted, shielding his eyes from the last rays of light. "I don't see anyone," he said, scanning the area. The drone was flying over. I looked up from the screen, 10 byte down. On the feed, the figure was still there, dark and lanky, almost scrambling on all fours. But when I looked at the actual landscape, there was nothing. Just swaying bushes and lengthening shadows. A cold knot formed in my stomach. "No, man. Look," I insisted, showing him the screen. "It's right there." Keeping pace, Liam leaned in, his eyes widened. "What? ... Is that? It's moving so fast." We watched, mesmerized and increasingly unnerved, as this asterisk darted between cacti and rocks, its movements jerky and wrong. It wasn't human. It was too fast, too low to the ground. It looked like a distorted animal, but it had the vague shape of a person. The battery indicator flashed red. 5%. "Crap," I muttered, my hands getting sweaty. "It needs to land now." The drone was only about 50 feet away from us, beginning its final landing sequence. The figure on the screen was getting closer to it. It was almost directly underneath the drone now. My heart was pounding. This was impossible. We were standing right there, and we couldn't see anything with our own eyes. Only the drone's camera could. Then, the battery hit 1%. The screen flickered. "Low battery. Auto landing." Just as the drone was about 10 feet off the ground, the controller screen went black. The feed was dead. "No! No!" I yelled. We both looked up at the drone, now just a dark shape against the last of the twilight. It touched down silently on the dusty ground. For a moment, there was just the sound of the wind. Liam and I just stared at each other, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Was it a glitch? A trick of the light? But we both knew what we saw. We hesitated, neither of us wanting to be the first to walk over to the drone. The sun had completely set now, and the desert was plunged into a deep, inky darkness. I fumbled for my headlamp and clicked it on. Its beam cut a nervous path through the night. "Okay," I said, my voice shaky. "Let's just grab it and go." Now we started walking toward the drone, our footsteps sounding way too loud in the silence. The spot where it landed was only a short distance away, near a cluster of large boulders. As we got closer, an awful smell hit me. It was coppery and foul, like a slaughterhouse. "You smell that?" Liam whispered, his voice trembling. I nodded, unable to speak. My headlamp beam found the drone. It was sitting there, intact. But something was wrong. There was a dark, wet smear across the top of it, and a few coarse, dark hairs were stuck to the casing. My blood ran cold. That smell. It was coming from the drone. Liam gagged. "What is that?" Before I could answer, we heard a sound. It was a low, guttural click, coming from the direction of the boulders, just beyond the drone. It sounded like someone clicking their tongue, but it was deeper, more resonant, more animal. We froze. My light darted towards the sound, but the beam just bounced off the dark rock face. Then we heard it again, closer this time. Asterisk. Click. Asterisk. It was followed by a chillingly perfect imitation of a baby's cry. It echoed through the canyon, high-pitched and desperate. It was so real, so full of pain, that, for a split second, my instinct was to run toward it, to help, but my rational mind screamed at me. There were no babies out here. "Liam," I whispered, my voice barely a tremor. "We need to leave the drone. We need to go. Right now." He didn't need convincing. As we started backing away, slowly, carefully, the crying stopped. It was replaced by a new sound, a voice. It was my voice. "Hey guys, wait up!" It called out from the darkness behind the boulders, just grabbing the drone. It was a perfect mimicry of my own voice, every inflection, every nuance, but it was empty, soulless. We didn't wait to hear any more. We turned and ran. We sprinted through the darkness, thorns tearing at our clothes, rocks tripping our feet. We didn't look back. The sounds followed us. My own voice, then Liam's, calling out to each other. Laughter that sounded like grinding rocks. A coyote's howl that morphed into a human scream. It was a symphony of terror, chasing us all the way back to the truck. We threw ourselves inside, locking the doors. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so violently I could barely get it into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the truck into drive, peeling out onto the dirt track. In the rearview mirror, my headlights illuminated the desert we were fleeing, and for a fraction of a second, I saw it, standing on the track where our truck had been parked. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs bent at angles that were just ... wrong. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its frame, and its eyes glowed faintly in the headlights, like a predator's. Then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness as we sped away. We never went back for the drone. The footage, the smell, the sounds, they're burned into my memory. We reported it, of course. The park rangers listened, cabellos polite, skeptical looks, and talked about coyotes and mountain lions being clever mimics. But we know what we saw. We know what we heard. The drone's battery died. But that thing, it didn't need a battery to follow us. It was watching us through the camera, and when the camera went dark, it just kept coming. We captured something on that drone. Something ancient and hungry that lives in the desert's quiet places, and I'm terrified that it remembers what we look like. Thanks for listening to my story. It's something I had to get off my chest. Be careful out there. You never know what's watching. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more strange tales. Stay safe. Log entry. October 27th. Ranger Thorne, on duty. Graveyard shift. It's my third week out here in the Petrified Forest, and the silence is still something you have to get used to. It's not empty. It's just waiting. The moon is a sliver tonight, barely enough to turn the ancient, fossilized logs into strange, sleeping giants. Dispatch gave me the usual rundown. Check the perimeter. Make sure no late-night adventurers are trying to snag a piece of rainbow wood, and keep an eye out for anything unusual. Out here, unusual has a pretty broad definition. The night started quiet. The wind whispers through the sparse junipers, and the air carries the scent of dust and ozone. Around 1 a.m., I was doing my loop near the Crystal Forest Trail when the radio crackled. It was Sarah from dispatch. Her voice was a little shaky. She said they'd gotten a call about an hour ago. A hiker, a young guy, hadn't returned to his car at the designated time. His girlfriend was panicking. Last she heard, he was trying to get some epic sunset photos off the beaten path. That's a classic mistake one. I told Sarah I'd do a preliminary sweep. Standard procedure. You drive the main roads, flash your spotlight into the darkness, call out their name. You don't go charging into the wilderness after them. Not at night. The desert is unforgiving. Every shadow looks like a ravine. Every rock looks like a crouching animal. I grabbed the logbook to make a note. The last entry on this page, written in a different hand, probably old man Hemlock's before he retired, was just 4 words, underlined twice. Do not track anything. I chuckled at the time. Sounded like something a grizzled old-timer would say. I drove out toward the Blue Mesa Trail, where the guy's car was parked. The air felt heavier there, colder. I killed the engine and stepped out. Hello? Ranger Thorne? Is anyone out here? My voice felt small, swallowed by the immense, quiet dark. Nothing. Just the wind. I called out the hiker's name. Let's call him Alex. Alex. Park Service. Make your location known. Silence. But then, I heard it. A faint sound, carried on the wind. A voice. It sounded like a man crying for help. Help me, ... I'm over here, ... Hurt, ... My training kicked in. Adrenaline started to pump. The voice was weak, but it was clear. It seemed to be coming from a wash about 100 yards off the road. I grabbed my high-lumen flashlight and my med kit. Every instinct told me to go. Someone was hurt. But then, Hemlock's warning echoed in my mind. Do not track anything. He'd felt stupid. A man needed help. Sarah, I've got a possible voice contact. I radioed in. Sounds like our guy. I'm going to try and get a visual. Before she could respond, the voice called out again, closer this time. Please, ... my leg. I think it's broken. It had a strange quality to it now. A little too high-pitched. A little too ... rehearsed. Like someone imitating a person in pain. My hand froze on the truck's door handle. That's when my spotlight caught something. 2 points of light, low to the ground, just at the edge of the wash. Animal eyes. Coyote? Probably, but they weren't yellow or green. They were a piercing, intelligent blue, and they were watching me. They didn't blink. The voice called out again, from the asterisk, same exact spot. Asterisk is the eyes. Can't you see me? I'm right here. A chill, cold and sharp, went straight down my spine. That wasn't a man. I slowly backed away, got into the truck, and locked the doors. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I radioed Sarah. Sarah, disregard. Full salam. I'm returning to the main road. Thorne, are you okay? You sound... ... I'm fine. I cut her off. Just the wind playing tricks. I knew she wouldn't buy it, but I didn't know what else to say. How do you tell dispatch you think you just heard a coyote mimic a human voice perfectly? As I started the engine and put the truck in drive, I looked back toward the wash. The blue eyes were gone, but standing where they had been was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, and silhouetted against the rock. It was too dark to see details, but it wasn't shaped right. Its limbs were too long, its posture all wrong. It just stood there, watching me leave. It didn't move a muscle, it just watched. I spent the rest of the night driving the paved loops, my eyes glued to the mirrors. Every shadow seemed to twist and reform into that tall, wrong shape. The desert no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. I thought about the missing hiker, Alex. I thought about him being out there with ... that the help me calls didn't come again. The silence that followed was somehow worse. When the sun finally started to bleed over the horizon, painting the petrified logs in hues of orange and pink, It didn't bring relief. It just felt like a temporary reprieve. Search and rescue arrived at dawn. They found Alex's camera first, smashed at the bottom of a shallow ravine. They didn't find him. Not that day, not the next. He just vanished. Later that week, I was looking through some old incident reports in the station. I found one from Hemlock's time, about a decade ago. Another missing person, a tourist who wandered off. In the margins, Hemlock had scribbled a note. Heard it again. The voice that calls for help. Stayed in the truck. Warned the new kid not to follow sounds at night. Beneath it, he'd written the same 4 words I saw in the logbook. Do not track anything. I don't know what's out there in the painted darkness of this forest. The Navajo have stories, of course. Stories about things that can wear a man's voice, like a coat. Things that can change their shape and lure you away from the safety of the firelight. They say you should never answer a voice you don't recognize in the wilderness, especially at night. I understand that now. This place is ancient, and it holds ancient things. And some things are best left unfound. I'm requesting a transfer tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in to this log entry. If you felt that chill down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe for more tailies from the graveyard shift. Stay safe out there, and always stay on the trail. You ever get that feeling, deep in your gut, that you're not supposed to be somewhere? A primal warning that your brain just can't quite process. I should have listened to mine. My name is Leo, and I used to be what you'd call an amateur geologist, a rock hound. My passion was the deserts of the Southwest, specifically the intricate beauty of slot canyons. There was one deep in unmarked Navajo territory that became my obsession. The locals called it the Silent Flute, a name that sounded more poetic than ominous. They warned me away with tight-lipped smiles and eyes that held a story they wouldn't share. They spoke of old things that slept in the rock. But I was arrogant. I saw only sandstone, wind, and time. The hike in was brutal, a full day under a punishing sun. But when I finally squeezed through the narrow entrance, the world changed. The heat vanished, replaced by a cool, still air. The light filtered down from above, painting the twisting canyon walls in shades of orange, purple, and deep crimson. It was breathtaking. A cathedral carved by water and time. I felt a sense of reverence, but also a sense of being watched. I shook it off as paranoia. In a place this ancient, you're bound to feel small. I set up my small camp on a sandy bank, planning to spend 2 days photographing the light as it moved through the canyon. The silence was absolute. Not a bird, not an insect, just the whisper of the wind at the canyon's entrance, miles away. That first night, as darkness filled the canyon like black water, I heard it. A single, clear note. It was beautiful, melodic, almost like a woman's singing. It echoed down the canyon, pure and haunting. I grabbed my flashlight, my heart thumping. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, another note, and another, forming a simple, hypnotic melody. I was more curious than scared. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The singing stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than before. I waited, listening, for what felt like an hour. Nothing. I convinced myself it was the wind, playing tricks, a natural resonance in the rock. It had to be. I crawled into my sleeping bag, but sleep wouldn't come. Every shadow seemed to shift and dance at the edge of my firelight. The second day was stranger. I explored deeper, my camera clicking away, but the feeling of being watched intensified. I'd round a corner and feel a sudden cold spot. I'd see movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I'd turn, there was only rock. The air grew heavy, charged with static. That evening, I was packing up, ready to leave at first light. That's when the singing started again. The same beautiful, lonely melody, but this time, it was different. After the melody finished, a voice, soft and clear, echoed through the canyon. 10. It was a woman's voice, calm / unhurried. It sounded so close, My blood ran cold. I yelled out again, "Who's there?" This isn't funny. The only reply was the echo of my own voice, and then, a few moments later, the same calm voice. 9. I scrambled for my gear, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip my pack. This was wrong. This was all wrong. The locals' warnings, the old things, it all came rushing back. I had to get out. I clicked on my headlamp, its beam cutting a frantic path through the suffocating darkness. 8. The voice was closer now. It sounded like it was just around the next bend. I started running, stumbling over rocks, my pack bouncing painfully on my back. The canyon walls seemed to press in on me, suffocating me. 7. I could hear something else. A faint, dry scratching sound. The sound of claws on stone. It was keeping pace with me, just out of sight in the winding darkness behind me. Panic gave me a burst of adrenaline. I ran harder, my lungs burning, my only thought to reach the canyon entrance. 6. The scratching was louder, closer. I risked a glance back. In the split-second sweep of my headlamp, I saw it. It wasn't human. It was tall and unnervingly thin, its limbs too long, its joints bending at impossible angles. Its skin was the color of dry clay, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. But the face, it had no face. Who's the smooth blank surface where a face should be? I screamed, a raw, ragged sound that was swallowed by the stone. 5. I fell, my knee smashing into a rock. Pain shot up my leg, but fear was a stronger force. I crawled, dragging my pack, scrambling on all fours like a panicked animal. The scratching was right behind me. I could smell it now, a scent of dust, decay, and something ancient and predatory. 4. The voice wasn't just in the canyon anymore. It was in my head. It was a siren's call and a death knell all at once. The creature behind me wasn't just hunting me. It was performing a ritual. The countdown wasn't for me. It was for Asterisk. This was a countdown to its transformation. Its feeding. The locals didn't call it a skinwalker for nothing. It needed a new skin. My skin. 3. I saw a sliver of starry sky ahead, the entrance. It was maybe 100 yards away. I abandoned my pack and pushed myself up, ignoring the screaming pain in my leg. I limped, hopped, and ran, propelled by sheer terror. The scratching sound was replaced by a low, guttural growl. It was done playing. 2. I threw myself through the narrow opening, tumbling out onto the desert floor under the cold light of the moon. I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not daring to look back. Behind me, from the mouth of the canyon, I heard the final number. No longer a calm voice, but a shriek of rage and frustration that tore through the night. 1. Then, an unearthly howl echoed from the depths of the canyon, a sound of pure hatred and thwarted hunger. It was a sound that no known animal could ever make. I ran all night. I didn't stop until the sun rose and I stumbled onto a dirt road, where a rancher found me, dehydrated and babbling. I never told him the full story. Who would believe me? I never went back to the desert. I can't even look at pictures of canyons anymore. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I can still hear it. That beautiful, terrible singing, and then a soft whisper right in my ear. 10. It's just my imagination. It has to be. But I have this terrifying feeling that one day, the countdown will start again. And this time, it won't stop at 1. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there, and always, always listen to that feeling in your gut. See you next time. The sun bleeds across the New Mexico horizon, painting the desert in hues of orange and purple. It's a beautiful sight, but out here, beauty often hides a deep, unsettling darkness. My name is Alex, and for years, I've chased the whispers and shadows that haunt these lands. but nothing could have prepared me for what I found on Bureau of Indian Affairs Road 12. A lonely stretch of asphalt known for stories that make your blood run cold. It started with a tip from an old friend, a tribal police officer named Ben. He called me late one night, his voice strained. "Alex," he said, "you need to see this. But be careful. Some things are better left alone." He told me about an old, abandoned school bus sitting just off BIA 12. It had been there for decades, a forgotten relic. But recently, people started reporting strange things. Whispers on the wind when there was no breeze, movement in the corner of their eye, and a chilling feeling of being watched. The next day, I drove out. The desert was quiet, almost too quiet. I found the bus exactly where Ben said it would be. It was a skeleton of rust and shattered glass. Its yellow paint faded to a pale, sickly color. The tires were long gone, and the desert was slowly reclaiming it. An eerie silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. You could feel the history here. The echoes of children's laughter, long since silenced. As I approached, a strange detail caught my eye. Scratched into the rusted metal near the door were 6 stick figures, like a child's drawing. But next to them, fainter and fresher, was a 7th. This one was different. It was stagiaire distorted, with long, unnaturally thin limbs. A shiver traced its way down my spine. It felt like a warning. Ignoring the knot in my stomach, I pulled myself up the steps. The inside was a disaster. The seats were torn, stuffing spilling out like dried guts. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, cutting through the grime-caked windows. The air was stale, thick with the smell of rust and something else. Something faintly metallic and unsettling, like old blood. I began filming, my camera a small shield against the oppressive atmosphere. I counted the rows of seats. 3 on each side, 6 seats in total. I remembered the drawings outside. 6 seats, 6 figures, but there was a 7th shadow. My mind kept returning to that disturbing image. As I moved deeper into the bus, the temperature dropped. My breath misted in the air. This wasn't normal, desert cold. This was a deep, penetrating chill that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the bus. That's when I heard it, a soft scratching sound. It came from the back of the bus. I froze, every nerve on high alert. I told myself it was just an animal, a desert rat or a lizard. But the sound was rhythmic, deliberate. Scratch, pause, scratch. It sounded like fingernails dragging across metal. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slowly raised my camera, pointing it toward the rear of the bus. Through the viewfinder, I saw something that made my blood freeze. At the very back, in the last seat on the left, a shadow was moving. It wasn't a trick of the light. It detached itself from the deeper darkness, elongating and twisting. It was tall, possibly thin, and its shape was horribly wrong. It didn't look human. The scratching stopped. The shadow just swayed. I couldn't breathe. My training, my skepticism, everything evaporated in that moment. I was face to face with pure, primal fear. The stories Ben told me, the whispers of the Navajo elders, all crashed down on me. Skinwalker. The word echoed in my mind, a primal scream. A being of absolute malevolence. A creature that can mimic, that can twist itself into your deepest fears. Then, a new sound began. A low, guttural clicking. It was a mimicry of a human voice, but horribly distorted, like a recording played backward and twisted. It was trying to form words, but they came out as broken, guttural noises. And in that cacophony of horror, I heard one clear sound. My name, Lex. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He knew I was there. Itzi no Mainami. I didn't think I just ran. I scrambled out of that bus, stumbling down the steps and not daring to look back. I could feel its presence behind me, a cold weight on my soul. The clicking sound followed me, seeming to come from all directions at once, a chorus of nightmare fuel chasing me through the desert scrub. I threw my gear in the truck and slammed the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As the engine roared to life, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I saw it. A tall, dark figure standing in the doorway of the bus, its form silhouetted against the dying light. It was just watching me, and then it was gone. I drove, not stopping, not even looking back until the lights of the nearest town were a comforting glow on the horizon. I never went back to BIA 1-2. The footage I captured is disturbing. When I reviewed it, you can see the shadow in the back of the bus. You can hear the scratching and the awful, distorted clicking. But the most terrifying part is when you enhance the audio. Just before our run, clear as day, you can hear it whisper my name. Some places hold on to their pain. Some stories are warnings. The abandoned school bus on BIA 1-2 is one of those places. A place where the number of seats doesn't match the number of shadows. A place where something ancient and hungry waits in the dark. It's a reminder that some legends are real, and that when you go looking for monsters, you might just find them, and they might just know your name. Thank you for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you appreciate these investigations into the unknown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Stay safe out there, and always be aware of the shadows. You never know what might be hiding in them. The night air on Route 666, or the Devil's Highway, as the old-timers call it, has a way of getting under your skin. It's a cold that has nothing to do with the temperature. I learned that the hard way, hauling a load of industrial parts from Gallup, New Mexico, to Monticello, Utah. It was just me, my rig, and the endless ribbon of asphalt, disappearing into the inky blackness of the Navajo Nation. My name's Jack, and I've been driving trucks for 20 years. I've seen my share of strange things out on the lonely highways of America, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for that night. The moon was a pale sliver, offering little comfort against the vast, oppressive darkness. The only sounds were the hum of my engine and the crackle of the CB radio, my only lifeline to the outside world. I was about an hour out of Gallup, deep in the heart of the reservation, when the feeling started. A primal sense of being watched. I scanned my mirrors, but there was nothing behind me. The road ahead was empty. I chalked it up to fatigue, the highway playing tricks on a tired mind. I took a long swig of lukewarm coffee and cranked up the radio, hoping some classic rock would shake the jitters. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger, like a physical pressure against the cab of my truck. The hairs on my arms stood on end. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. That's when I decided to reach out, to hear another human voice. I picked up the CB mic. Breaker 19. This is Road Dog. Anyone got a copy out on the Devil's Highway tonight? It's a lonely one. Static. Just dead air. That was unusual. Usually, there's some chatter. Another driver looking to kill time. I tried again. Come on. Anyone out there? Road Dog, looking for a friendly voice. Over. More static. I was about to hang up the mic when a voice crackled through the speaker. It was faint, distorted, like it was coming from a long way off. Copy that, Road Dog. You're not alone. Alone. A wave of relief washed over me. Glad to hear it, friend. Where are you headed? The reply was slow, each word punctuated by a burst of static. Nowhere. And everywhere. A chill snaked down my spine. The voice didn't sound right. It was raspy, guttural, and had a strange, lilting quality to it. It sounded inhuman. Copy that, I stammered, my hands suddenly slick with sweat. Just keep the shiny side up. I waited for a sign-off, a 10-4, or a catch you on the flip side. Instead, what came through the radio was laughter. It wasn't a human laugh. It was a high-pitched, cackling sound that scraped against my ear. It was the sound a hyena might make if it learned to mimic human mirth. A sound full of malice and hunger. My blood ran cold. I slammed the mic back into its holder, my heart hammering against my ribs. The laughter continued, echoing in the small cab, seeming to come from all around me. I glanced at my mirrors again, and this time, I saw it. Far behind me, 2 points of light. Headlights. No. They were too high off the ground, and they glowed with a feral, amber intensity. They weren't headlights. Wary eyes. Panic took over. I floored the accelerator, the engine roaring in protest. My rig lurched forward, eating up the miles. But when I looked in the mirror again, the eyes were closer. They were keeping pace, effortlessly. The laughter from the CB grew louder, more frantic. A chorus of deranged glee. I fumbled to turn the radio off, but the knob wouldn't budge. The laughter was trapped in the cab with me. Then I saw movement at the side of the road. A large animal, a coyote maybe, sprinting alongside the truck. But it was too big, its legs too long, its gait unnervingly human. It ran on all fours, its head turned to look directly at me, and in the faint glow of my dashboard, I saw its face. It was a twisted mockery of a canine, with intelligent, hateful eyes that burned with that same amber light. Its mouth was pulled back in a grotesque grin, revealing rows of sharp teeth. The laughter on the radio merged with a new sound, the rhythmic thump of something hitting the side of my trailer. Thump, thump, thump. It was trying to get in. The coyote thing at my window leaped, its claws scraping against the glass with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. I swerved, the whole rig groaning as the tires screamed. The creature fell away, but the eyes in my mirror were still there, unwavering. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the cackling on the CB. It was clear and calm, an old man's voice. Driver, do not look at it. Do not acknowledge it. Keep your eyes on the road and pray. Whatever you do, do not stop. It was an old Navajo man, his voice a beacon of sanity in the madness. They feed on fear, son. They twist what you hear. That's not a CB signal. That's them in your head. Just as he finished speaking, the laughter on the radio stopped. Absolute silence. The thumping on the trailer ceased. I dared a glance at my side mirror. The coyote thing was gone. I looked in the rearview mirror. The amber eyes had vanished. The oppressive feeling in the cab lifted, replaced by the simple, clean cold of the desert night. You still there? I whispered into the mic, my voice trembling. I'm here, the old man's voice replied. You're almost through their territory. Just a few more miles. They don't like to stray too far from their hunting grounds. We talked for the next 10 minutes, his calm voice keeping the terror at bay. He didn't explain what they were, and I didn't ask. I knew. I'd heard the stories from other drivers. Tailies whispered at truck stops about the Skinwalker, the Navajo shapeshifters. When the first lights of Montetilo appeared on the horizon, the old man's voice said, "You're safe now, Road Dog. Be careful on your return. The highway doesn't forget." Then, with a soft click, he was gone. I never heard his voice on the CB again. I've driven that route a dozen times since, but never again at night. Sometimes, when the static on the radio hits just right, I think I can hear it, a faint, high-pitched cackle, just on the edge of hearing. A reminder of Channel 9, the Devil's Highway, and the laugh that answered back. Thanks for tuning into our story tonight. If you have your own chilling encounter from the road, share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories from the dark side of the highway. Stay safe out there. Have you ever heard a sound in the dead of night that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up? A sound that felt wrong. My friends and I did, and it's a night we'll never forget. This is the story of our camping trip to Spider Rock, and the fire that repeated our names. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway. Me, Liam, Chloe, and Ben. Escaping the city for the raw, majestic beauty of the Arizona desert. We were experienced hikers, but none of us had ever camped near Spider Rock. The sheer, twin-pinnacled sandstone spire was breathtaking, a silent giant watching over the canyon. As we set up our tents, the local Navajo stories we'd read about skinwalkers felt like nothing more than campfire folklore. Fun little ghost stories to spice up the trip. We laughed him off. That was our first mistake. The sun began to bleed across the horizon, painting the canyon in hues of orange and purple. We got a fire going, its crackle and pop a comforting sound in the vast, encroaching darkness. We roasted marshmallows, told stupid jokes, and for a while, everything was perfect. The stars overhead were a brilliant, glittering canopy, unlike anything you can see in the city. But as the night deepened, a strange quiet fell over the canyon. The usual chirping of crickets and the rustle of small animals just stopped. An unnatural silence pressed in on us. Then, ever the Joker, tried to break the tension. Whoa, spooky quiet. Maybe the coyotes are having a silent disco. We all chuckled, but it was a nervous sound. That's when we heard the first noise, a faint whistle carried on the wind. It was a simple, three-note tune, and it seemed to come from the direction of the spire. Liam squinted into the darkness. Probably just the wind moving through the rocks, he said, trying to sound convinced. But the whistle came again, a little closer this time, clearer. It was definitely a whistle. It wasn't the wind in a war. I said the fire was our only bubble of light and warmth in a sea of black. We were all on edge, our conversation strained. Then, Chloe gasped and pointed toward the edge of the firelight. Did you guys see that? We all looked. There was nothing there but shifting shadows cast by the dancing flames. I thought I saw something moving. Low to the ground, she whispered, her voice trembling. We tried to brush it off as a trick of the light, an overactive imagination fueled by the eerie silence. But we all found ourselves staring a little harder into the darkness beyond our camp. The whistling stopped. For a moment, we felt a wave of relief. Maybe it really was just some weird echo. And then, we heard a new sound, a voice. It was faint, barely audible over the crackling fire, and it said my name. Alex. It was a raspy whisper, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It sounded distorted, as if someone was trying to mimic a human voice but couldn't quite get it right. My blood ran cold. I looked at my friends. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide. They'd heard it too. Okay, that's not funny, Ben, Liam said, his voice tight. Ben held up his hands. Wasn't me, I swear. Before anyone could say anything else, the voice came again. This time with a different name. Chloe. It was closer now, just beyond the reach of our firelight. Chloe let out a small, terrified whimper and pulled her knees to her chest. It was her voice, but not her voice. It was a twisted, mocking imitation. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Panic started to set in. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't the wind. The stories we'd laughed about earlier came rushing back. The tales of creatures that could imitate the voices of your loved ones, luring you out into the dark. Skinwalkers. We threw more wood on the fire, desperate to make it bigger, brighter. The flames roared to life, pushing the darkness back a few more feet. We huddled together, a small island of terrified humans. Then, the voice spoke again, using Liam's voice this time, calling out Ben's name. Ben. Come here. It was a perfect mimicry, but filled with a malice that made my stomach churn. We didn't dare move. We just sat there, frozen, listening as this thing cycled through our names, using our own voices against us. It was a form of psychological torture. It was trying to separate us, to pick us off one by preying on our trust. The air grew thick with a foul, musky odor, like a wet dog, mixed with something rotten. We could hear it circling our campsite, the soft padding of what sounded like heavy paws on the sandy soil, always just out of sight. Sometimes we'd hear a low growl, other times a click or a strange chattering sound. For what felt like an eternity, we were trapped in this nightmare. No one spoke. The only sounds were the fire, our own ragged breathing, and the horrifying chorus of our own voices calling out from the darkness. We kept our eyes on the fire, feeding it logs whenever it started to die down, believing it was the only thing keeping us safe. The legends said they were afraid of fire. We prayed the legends were true. The first rays of dawn were the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. As the sky began to lighten from black to a deep indigo, the sound stopped. The oppressive silence returned, but this time it felt like a reprieve. The foul smell dissipated. We waited, not daring to believe it was over, until the sun was fully above the canyon rim, bathing the entire landscape in golden light. We had survived the night. We didn't even bother with breakfast. We threw our gear into our packs with trembling hands, our eyes constantly scanning the rocks around us. We didn't say a word as we hiked out, moving faster than we ever had before. Around our abandoned campsite, we saw tracks. They were strange, a disturbing mix of something canine and something human, larger than any animal track we knew. They had circled our fire pit over and over again. We never went back to Spider Rock. Sometimes, late at night when it's too quiet, I can still hear it, that raspy, distorted whisper, saying my name. It serves as a chilling reminder that there are some places in this world where the old stories are more than just stories, and that some things are better left undisturbed. The desert holds ancient secrets. And that night, we stumbled upon one that wasn't meant for us. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's a heavy one, I know. If you've ever had a similar experience, or just enjoyed Tales of the Unexplained, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there, and always respect the legends of the land you're on. The sun was setting over Lake Powell, painting the sandstone cliffs in fiery shades of orange and red. My family and I were on our annual houseboat trip, a tradition I'd cherished since I was a kid. The water was like glass, the air was still, and everything felt perfect. We anchored for the night in a secluded cove, the silence broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the hull. That first night, I was woken up by a strange sound. It was faint at first, almost like someone was walking on the roof of the houseboat. But that was impossible. We were miles from any shore, surrounded by deep water. I sat up, listening. Thump, thump, thump. It was slow, deliberate. My heart started to pound. I crept to the window and peered out into the moonlit darkness. Nothing. Just the dark, shimmering surface of the lake. I told myself it was just the boat settling or some animal that had somehow gotten on board. I tried to go back to sleep, but the sound and the unease it brought lingered. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Dad was making coffee. Mom was reading on the deck. I mentioned the footsteps, and they brushed it off. Probably just a loose panel or something, Dad said with a reassuring smile. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Later that day, while my sister and I were swimming off the back of the boat, she pointed to something in our wake. Floating just below the surface was a pair of deer antlers. They were large, bleached by the sun, and eerily out of place in the middle of the vast lake. How did they get there? It sent a shiver down my spine. That night, the thumping returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't on the roof anymore. It was outside, on the water. It sounded like heavy, wet footsteps, splashing slowly, methodically, circling the houseboat. I was paralyzed with fear. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever was out there wasn't an animal. No animal walks on water. I pulled the covers over my head, my breath catching in my throat, praying for the sun to rise. The third day was filled with a suffocating tension. No one was smiling. Even the vibrant colors of the canyons seemed dull and menacing. My dad, usually so calm, kept scanning the shoreline with his binoculars, a worried frown etched on his face. He'd found something that morning near the anchor-line deep, three-toed tracks in the mud of a tiny sandbar we were tied to. They weren't from any animal he recognized. They were too large, too deep, and they led directly into the water. As darkness fell, a storm rolled in. The wind howled, and rain lashed against the windows. And through the storm, we heard it. A voice. It was a high-pitched, guttural sound, mimicking a child's cry for help. "Help me. I'm lost. Please." It seemed to come from the water, just beyond the dim light of our porch lamp. My mom grabbed my arm, her knuckles white. "Don't you dare go out there," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's not a person." The crying continued, getting more desperate. more insistent. It was a cruel imitation, designed to lure us out. We all knew what the local legend said about the Navajo skinwalkers, shapeshifters who could mimic any sound, any voice, to draw their victims in. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the back of the boat, as if something heavy had slammed into it. My dad grabbed a heavy mag light. His face pale but determined, he crept to the sliding glass door at the stern. Through the rain-streaked glass, we saw it. For just a second, caught in the flashlight's beam, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its skin stretched unnaturally over its bones. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at impossible angles. But the most terrifying part was its head. It was the skull of a deer, the same kind of antlers we'd seen in the water, affixed to a vaguely human torso. Its eyes were hollow sockets that seemed to burn with a malevolent, ancient intelligence. It wasn't an animal, and it wasn't human. It was something in between, something born of nightmare. It let out a screech, a sound that was a horrifying mix of a deer's bellow and a human scream, and then it slipped back into the churning, black water. We didn't sleep a wink that night. We huddled together in the main cabin, listening to the footsteps circling, the scratching against the hull, the terrible mimicry of voices just outside. When the first hint of dawn broke the horizon, my dad didn't hesitate. He cut the anchor line with a knife, fired up the engine, and we sped out of that cove as fast as the houseboat could go. We never looked back. We never spoke of what we saw, but none of us could ever forget. The image of those antlers in the water, the sound of footsteps on the lake, and the sight of that impossible creature in the storm are burned into my memory. Lake Powell is a beautiful place, but there are things in its canyons, things that walk in the dark and wait in the deep water, that are older and more terrifying than any story can truly capture. We never went back, and I know I never will. Thanks for listening to my story tonight. I hope it gave you a good chill. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the dark. Stay safe out there, and until next time, sweet dreams. Have you ever been to a night market where the air buzzes, not just with chatter and the smell of fried bread, but with something ancient and unsettling? I have. And I'll never forget the night I went to the Shiprock night market and met the vendor who sold voices. It was one of those late autumn evenings, New Mexico, where the desert air turns sharp the moment the sun dips below the horizon. The market was a kaleidoscope of light and sound, a welcome island of warmth in the vast, dark expanse of the Navajo Nation. My cousin, Thomas, and I were there for the free bread and the gossip, weaving through crowds of families and tourists. That's when we saw it. Tucked away at the far edge of the market, where the cheerful lantern light barely reached, was a stall unlike any other. Most vendors had brightly lit tents, overflowing with silver jewelry, vibrant rugs, and the delicious aroma of mutton stew. This one was different. It was just a simple, dark wood table under a tattered canvas awning, lit by a single, flickering oil lamp. Behind the table sat a man, or what I thought was a man. His face was lost in the deep shadows cast by a wide-brimmed hat, but his hands were what caught my eye. They were long and unnaturally thin, resting on a collection of small, intricately carved wooden boxers. Thomas, ever the skeptic, nudged me. Look at this guy. Probably selling snake oil. But I was drawn in. Curiosity is a powerful thing, and sometimes it's a dangerous thing. As we got closer, a strange silence seemed to fall around us. The lively noise of the market faded into a dull hum, as if we'd stepped into a pocket of dead air. The man didn't look up as we approached. Looking for something special? He asked. His voice was a low, raspy whisper like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. On the tea table beside the wooden boxers were several old, leather-bound journals and a few clay pots filled with what looked like sand and feathers. "What are you selling?" I asked, my voice sounding small and thin and the strange quiet. He finally lifted his head slightly, and the lamplight caught his eyes. They weren't normal. They seemed to glow with a faint, predatory light, like a coyote's caught in headlights. He smiled, a slow, unsettling stretching of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. "Memories," he rasped. "Stories. Voices." Thomas scoffed. Voices. What does that even mean? The man ignored him, his glowing eyes fixed on me. Every voice has a story. Every story has a power. I collect them. He tapped one of the small wooden boxers with a long, bony finger. This one, he whispered, holds the first cry of a newborn. This one, he tapped another. The last words of a wise elder. A cold dread began to crawl up my spine. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a show for tourists. The air was thick with an energy that felt wrong, ancient, and deeply predatory. I wanted to leave, to drag Thomas back into the light and noise of the market, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. "Let me show you," the man said, and his smile widened. He picked up a different box, one darker than the rest, and slowly lifted the lid. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, a sound filled the air. It was a laugh, a beautiful, melodic woman's laugh, full of joy and life. It was so real, so vibrant. It felt like she was standing right there beside us. I recognized it instantly. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. It was my grandmother's laugh. She had passed away 2 years ago. I stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs. How did you get that?" I stammered. The man's smile became a horrifying grin. "I told you. I collect them. People are so careless with their voices. They leave them everywhere, in the wind, on the phone, in the memories of others." Thomas, who had been pale and silent, finally found his voice. "This is sick. You're sick." He grabbed my arm. "Let's go, Jake." But the vendor wasn't finished. He closed the box, and the beautiful laugh vanished, plunging us back into that dreadful silence. "Perhaps you'd like to hear another," he hissed, his gaze flickering between us. He reached for a different box. "This one is more recent." He opened it, and a new voice filled the small space. It was a man, pleading. "Please, just let me go. I have a family." The voice was filled with sheer terror. It was a voice I'd heard just an hour ago, belonging to a jeweler from a few stalls down who had packed up early. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just packed up early. He was missing. That's when I understood. This wasn't a man. The stories, the old warnings from my grandfather, they all came rushing back. The tales of beings that could steal your skin, your face, your voice. Skinwalkers. They hunt in the darkness, mimicking sounds to lure their prey. A crying baby, a woman in distress, or in T's gaze, a grandmother's laugh. The vendor's form seemed to shift in the flickering lamplight. His shoulders hunched, and his frame seemed to elongate, to contort into something not quite human. The smile on his shadowed face was no longer just unsettling. It was purely animalistic. The eyes, those glowing eyes were locked onto us, filled with a hunger that was terrifyingly real. "You have a strong voice," the creature rasped, its gaze fixed on me, full of fear. "I'd like to add it to my collection." That broke the spell. Pure, primal terror took over. Thomas and I didn't say a word. We just turned and ran. We didn't look back. We crashed through the edge of the crowd, back into the warmth and the light, gasping for air. The sounds of the market rushed back in, a comforting wave of life and normality. We didn't stop running until we reached Thomas's truck, fumbling with the keys, our hands shaking uncontrollably. As we sped away from the market, leaving the lights and the darkness behind, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The market was a shrinking blur of color, but for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a tall, unnaturally thin figure standing at the edge of the desert, watching USA go, and I could have sworn I heard a faint, familiar sound on the wind, the sound of my grandmother's laugh, twisted into something cold and mocking. We never spoke of it again, not really. How could we? Who would believe us? But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. The Shiprock night market is a place of community, of tradition, of joy, but it's also on the edge of the wilderness, A place where the veil between our world and another is thin, and in the shadows, things are listening. Things are waiting. They collect more than just stories. They collect voices, and sometimes, if you're not careful, they might just collect yours. Thanks for listening to my story. Be careful out there, and always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unsettling tales from the real world. Stay safe.